My name is Marissa, and I'm a woman who spent years working my way up the ranks in a male-dominated field. The day of my big promotion felt like a dream come true. I could hardly believe it when I received the invitation to the annual hospital ceremony, where I was set to be recognized for my accomplishments as a surgical resident. My heart raced as I prepared for what I hoped would be a defining moment in my career. But as fate would have it, that day turned out to be more about the challenges I faced than the accolades I received. As I walked into the grand hall, the air was thick with anticipation. The chandeliers sparkled above, and the crowd buzzed with excitement, dressed in their finest suits and elegant gowns. It felt surreal to be part of this world, a world where I had fought tooth and nail to find my place. I was nervous, yet hopeful, ready to take a step closer to my dream of becoming a chief surgeon. But as I approached the seating area, I felt a pang of unease wash over me. My colleagues, many of whom I had trained with, were already seated at the front tables, laughing and chatting. I was directed to a back corner table, far from the spotlight. "Is this where you want me to sit?" I asked the event organizer, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded with a polite smile, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I had heard about these unspoken rules, the subtle biases that existed in our field, but this was the first time I had experienced it firsthand. I looked around at the others who were already mingling. I could see the expressions on their faces, some welcoming, but others indifferent, as if they were saying without words that I didn't quite belong there. It was as though I had been placed in a cage, and while I could see the celebration unfolding around me, I was expected to remain an observer, a footnote in someone else's story. As I sat in that dimly lit corner, I couldn't help but wonder, was this all I would ever be, someone who watched from the sidelines? What would you have done? Let me know below. Time seemed to stretch as I sat there, feeling a mix of frustration and determination. I had worked harder than most of my peers to get here. I had sacrificed personal relationships, countless hours of sleep, and even my own well-being in the pursuit of becoming a surgeon. The weight of all those sacrifices pressed down on me as I watched the ceremony unfold. I could hear the laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the proud speeches celebrating the accomplishments of my colleagues. Then came the moment I had anticipated for so long, the announcement of the new chief surgeon. My heart raced as the hospital director took the stage, his voice booming through the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to celebrate excellence in medicine and recognize those who have gone above and beyond." Cheers erupted around me, but I felt a strange mix of joy and anxiety. As the director spoke, I couldn't help but think about all the late nights I had spent in the operating room, the lives I had touched, and the skills I had honed. I thought about how much it meant to me to be in that room, to be seen and valued. The director continued, "Now, let's celebrate our new chief surgeon, a person whose dedication and skill have truly transformed our practice." In that moment, I thought my heart would burst. I imagined the applause, the recognition, the feeling of finally being validated for all my hard work. But as he paused, scanning the room, I saw his eyes land on someone else. A wave of confusion washed over me as he called out a name that echoed through the hall, one of my peers who had always stood in the limelight. My heart dropped. I felt the cheers and applause wash over me like a cold wave. This wasn't my moment. It was his. Suddenly, the mood shifted. The director raised his hand for silence, and the room quieted. "But before we move on," he said, "I want to recognize someone who has not only shown exemplary skill, but has also shattered barriers in our profession. Marissa, please join me on stage." Time froze. I could hardly process what was happening. Did he just say my name? I felt eyes turn toward me, whispers buzzing in the air. Was this a mistake? I could see the confusion on the faces of my colleagues, and I felt exposed, like a deer caught in headlights. With shaking hands and a pounding heart, I stood up, glancing at the back table where I had been seated moments before. As I walked to the front, I could hear the murmurs, the questions. Why her? What has she done? The spotlight felt blinding, yet I was determined to embrace this moment. This was my chance to redefine my narrative, to show that I belonged here, that I was more than just an observer in my own life. With each step, I felt a surge of empowerment. Perhaps this was the moment I had been waiting for. A chance to speak not just for myself, but for all the women who had ever felt sidelined in their careers. This wasn't just about me. It was about the countless women who had come before me and the ones who would follow. I took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next. As I reached the stage, the applause felt like a wave crashing over me, simultaneously supportive and intimidating. I looked out at the audience, a sea of faces, some familiar, some not. There was Dr. Martinez, my mentor, her smile warm and encouraging. Then I spotted the disapproving expressions of others, men who had always underestimated me, who had relegated me to the background. The duality of pride and trepidation washed over me. I was here, and I was visible. The microphone felt cool in my hand, and I adjusted it nervously. "Thank you," I began, my voice slightly trembling. "Thank you for this unexpected honor. I stand before you, not just as a chief surgeon, but as a woman who has fought to be recognized in a world that often tries to silence our voices." The words flowed out, and with each syllable, I felt a little less like an imposter and a little more like the leader I aspired to be. I spoke about my journey, the long nights in medical school, the sacrifices I had made, the moments of self-doubt that often clouded my confidence. I shared stories of patients who had changed my life, who had reminded me why I chose this profession. I spoke of the women I had worked alongside, brilliant, capable women whose contributions had been overshadowed by systemic biases. As I talked, I saw nods of agreement from some, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. But I didn't care. This was my moment to reclaim my narrative, to carve out a space not just for myself, but for all of us. I could see the women in the audience, and I hoped my words would resonate with them. I wanted them to feel empowered, to understand that their voices mattered, that they too could rise above the limitations imposed upon them. As I wrapped up my speech, I could feel the energy in the room shift. The audience was no longer a sea of indifferent faces, but a collective force, rallying behind my message. I stepped down from the stage, my heart still racing, but with a sense of accomplishment blooming within me. I was met with a round of applause that echoed in my ears, and as I descended the steps, I caught sight of Dr. Martinez giving me a thumbs up. But there was no time to bask in the glow of my achievement. Almost immediately, I was surrounded by colleagues eager to congratulate me. "You were amazing," someone exclaimed. "I had no idea you had it in you," another added, eyes wide with admiration. I smiled, accepting their compliments, but I couldn't shake the feeling that some were still unsure of my capabilities despite my speech. In the following days, the buzz about my speech continued. I was approached for interviews, asked to join panels, and even invited to speak at upcoming conferences. It felt surreal, exhilarating, and daunting all at once. I was still grappling with the reality of my new position, still navigating the complexities of being a woman in a male-dominated field. But it was in those moments of recognition that I found a deeper sense of purpose. I began to understand that my journey was not just about me. It was a stepping stone for others, a chance to pave the way for those who would follow. I started organizing workshops and mentorship programs, reaching out to young women interested in medicine. I wanted to share my experiences, both the triumphs and the struggles, in the hopes of lighting a path for them. One afternoon, while preparing for a workshop, I received an email from a student named Sarah. She wrote about how she had always wanted to pursue medicine but felt discouraged by the lack of female role models in her life. "Your speech inspired me," she wrote. "I didn't know women like you existed in this field, and now I want to be like you." Reading her words brought tears to my eyes. It was moments like these that made it all worthwhile. As I continued to dive into this new role, I often found myself reflecting on the ceremony and the unexpected turn my life had taken. It made me think about how often we underestimate our potential and the power of our voices. I wondered how many other women were out there, sitting quietly in the back, waiting for their moment to stand up and be heard. That thought lingered with me, motivating me to do more, to reach out and create opportunities. I connected with local high schools, starting a program that would bring young women into hospitals for shadowing experiences. I wanted them to see firsthand what a career in medicine looked like, to inspire them to chase their dreams despite the obstacles that might lie ahead. Yet, with every step forward, I faced challenges. The skepticism from some of my male colleagues was palpable. I could feel their eyes on me, assessing, judging. There were times when I questioned whether I was making a difference, or if my efforts were in vain. Was I truly changing the narrative, or was I just a fleeting moment in time? But then I would think of Sarah and the other young women whose lives I hoped to touch. I realized that each small victory was a step toward greater change. I was no longer just a surgeon. I was becoming an advocate, a mentor, a voice for those who felt voiceless. And that was a role I was proud to embrace. As I moved forward, I committed myself to this journey, determined to continue breaking down barriers, to keep pushing for change, and to always lift others as I climbed. After all, if there was anything I had learned from that ceremony, it was that our stories matter. And sometimes all it takes is one voice to inspire a multitude. The days following that ceremony were a whirlwind of emotions. I found myself reflecting on what it truly meant to be a leader in this field. The applause had faded, but the fire inside me was only growing. I began to carve out more time to meet with aspiring young women, eager to share my journey. I wanted them to know that the road was not only about the destination, but also about the lessons learned along the way. One afternoon, as I sat in a small sunlit cafe near the hospital, I met with a group of pre-med students. Their enthusiasm was infectious. They peppered me with questions about my experiences, the toughest surgeries I had faced, and what it really meant to be a woman in a male-dominated field. I watched their eyes light up as I spoke about the moments of triumph and the times I had to dig deep to find my resilience. "How do you handle the pressure?" one of them asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. I smiled, knowing that question well. It's all about perspective. When you're in the OR, it's not just about the life in front of you. It's about the lives you're serving. Remember, every challenge is just a stepping stone. If you can focus on the people who depend on you, the pressure becomes a little more manageable. The conversation flowed effortlessly, and I felt a sense of purpose wash over me. It was in these interactions that I realized mentorship was just as crucial as the medical skills I had spent years honing. I wasn't just performing surgeries. I was shaping futures. I was helping these women envision their place in a world that often seemed unwelcoming. Weeks turned into months, and the more I engaged, the more I noticed a shift in the culture around me. I wasn't the only one advocating for change. There were other women stepping up, sharing their stories, and holding space for one another. It was exhilarating to witness this movement gaining momentum. We were no longer just individual voices. We were a chorus, a united front pushing for progress. But with every victory came challenges that seemed to multiply. One evening after a long shift, I received an email that would shake me to my core. It was from the hospital administration, inviting me to a meeting regarding the upcoming diversity initiative. My heart raced as I read it. I had been pushing for more representation and equitable practices within our institution, and this meeting felt like a turning point. But then I hesitated. Would they truly listen? Or was this just another box to tick off in their diversity efforts? As I sat down to prepare for that meeting, I knew I had to approach it strategically. I needed to present not only the issues, but also solutions. I spent hours creating a presentation that highlighted the importance of diversity in medicine, showcasing data on how inclusive teams lead to better patient outcomes. I rehearsed my speech over and over, determined to convey my passion and the urgency of the matter. The day of the meeting arrived and my nerves were palpable. The conference room was filled with executives, department heads, and a few of my colleagues. I took a deep breath and reminded myself of the stakes. I wasn't just representing myself. I was speaking on behalf of countless women and minorities who felt marginalized in this profession. I started my presentation, and as I spoke, I felt a shift in the atmosphere. The room, initially stiff and guarded, began to lean in, their expression shifting from skepticism to curiosity. I shared stories of patients who had benefited from diverse care teams, illustrating how representation could lead to better understanding and communication. I could see nods of agreement from some, while others remained impassive. As I concluded, I felt a surge of hope. We need to create an environment where everyone feels they belong. This isn't just about filling quotas, it's about enriching our practice and serving our community better. Let's make this a priority, not just a project. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then, to my surprise, the hospital director stood up. "I'd like to thank Dr. Collins for her presentation. It's clear that these issues require our immediate attention. I propose we form a committee to address these concerns with actionable steps and timelines." The response was overwhelming. For the first time, I felt like the voice of change I had always wanted to be. My heart raced with a mix of joy and relief. They were listening. This was a pivotal moment, not just for me, but for everyone who had ever felt sidelined in this field. As we discussed the next steps, I couldn't help but think back to that ceremony where I'd felt so small, so diminished. I realized that the journey was far from over, but I was no longer in it alone. We were building a network, a community of advocates who understood the importance of representation and equity in medicine. I left that meeting with a renewed sense of purpose. I was ready to dive into this initiative, to use my voice and my platform for something greater than myself. It wasn't just about being seen, it was about making sure others would be seen too. In that moment, I understood that every effort, every challenge I had faced, had led me to this point. I was no longer just a surgeon or a mentor. I was part of a movement, a collective of voices demanding change, and I was determined to keep pushing forward, no matter what obstacles lay ahead. As I stepped outside, the crisp air hit my face, invigorating and grounding me. I took a deep breath, letting the weight of the past few months wash over me. The sun was shining, and it felt like a new day had dawned not just for me, but for all of us who had faced adversity in silence. I made my way to my car, feeling lighter than I had in a long time. The chatter of my colleagues echoed in my mind, their enthusiasm infectious. We were ready to roll out initiatives, workshops, and outreach programs aimed at uplifting underrepresented groups in medicine. We wanted to create a pipeline of support, not just for women, but for anyone who had felt marginalized in this field. I drove home, my mind racing with ideas. I could picture the workshops, spaces filled with eager faces, mentors sharing their stories, and discussions that sparked change. It was ambitious, but I knew we could do it. We had the passion, the drive, and now we were building a framework to support those who needed it most. My phone buzzed with notifications from our group chat, updates flying in about potential partnerships and event ideas. I smiled, feeling a rush of excitement. This was happening. That evening, I sat down with a cup of tea, my laptop open in front of me. I began drafting an outline for our first workshop. I wanted it to be impactful, something that would resonate with participants, not just another lecture. I envisioned a day filled with interactive sessions, storytelling, and hands-on activities that would empower everyone in the room. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I captured my thoughts, each word a step toward making this dream a reality. The following weeks were a whirlwind. We secured a venue, reached out to speakers, and began promoting the event. I felt like I was living in a blur of excitement and exhaustion, but every late night and early morning was worth it. My heart swelled as I watched our vision come together, the support pouring in from colleagues who believed in our mission. The camaraderie was palpable. We were all in this together. As the workshop day approached, I experienced a mix of anticipation and nerves. What if no one showed up? What if we failed to create the impact we had envisioned? But deep down, I knew this was bigger than me. It was about all the voices that had been silenced for too long. I reminded myself of why I was doing this: to create a space where others could find their strength and share their stories. Finally, the day arrived. I arrived at the venue early, the morning sunlight streaming through the windows as I set up the space. I could hear the buzz of conversations growing outside, and my heart raced as I welcomed our attendees. They came from all walks of life, some eager, others uncertain, but all ready to engage in the conversation we had started. I took a moment to breathe, to soak in the energy of the room. This was it, the culmination of our hard work and dreams. The workshop began, and I felt a surge of adrenaline as I took the stage. I shared my own story, the hurdles I had faced, and the resilience that had brought me to this moment. I talked about the importance of representation, how every voice mattered, and how together we could shape a future where everyone felt valued and heard. The room was silent, the weight of my words hanging in the air, and I could see reflections of my journey in the faces of those who listened. As the day progressed, I watched participants engage in discussions, share their own stories, and connect with one another. It was a beautiful sight, the room transforming into a sanctuary of acceptance and empowerment. Each breakout session was filled with laughter, tears, and moments of vulnerability. I could see the spark of inspiration igniting among us, a sense of belonging that had been missing for far too long. The workshop concluded with a call to action. We encouraged everyone to take what they had learned and share it with their communities. I wanted them to feel empowered to advocate for change, to be the voice for others who couldn't speak up. As we wrapped up, I looked around at the faces filled with hope and determination, and I knew we had created something special together. In the days that followed, I received messages and feedback from attendees, each one a reminder of why we had embarked on this journey. Some shared their plans to start their own initiatives, while others expressed gratitude for the sense of community they had found. It was overwhelming in the best way possible, affirming that we were on the right path. But as I reveled in the success of the workshop, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still so much work to be done. The challenges we faced in the medical field were systemic, deeply rooted, and required ongoing effort. I was determined to keep pushing, to keep advocating, not just for myself, but for all those who came after me. One evening, while scrolling through social media, I came across a post from a colleague I deeply respected. She had shared her own experience of being marginalized and spoke of the need for change in our profession. Her words resonated with me, and I felt a sense of kinship. I reached out to her, suggesting we collaborate on our next initiative. Together, we could amplify our voices and reach even more people. As I hit send on the message, I felt a sense of excitement bubbling within me. This was just the beginning. We were building something powerful, a movement that would echo through the halls of our institutions and beyond. We were no longer just individuals fighting alone. We were a collective force, united in our mission to advocate for representation, equity, and change. And no matter how daunting the road ahead might seem, I was ready to face it head-on, one step at a time. As days turned into weeks, our plans began to take shape. My colleague and I met regularly, each brainstorming session filled with ideas and passion. We envisioned a series of workshops aimed at educating both medical professionals and the community about the barriers to equity in healthcare. We wanted to bring awareness to the issues that often went unspoken, things that were brushed aside in meetings or overlooked in casual conversations. It felt empowering to share our experiences, to acknowledge the struggles we had faced, and to transform that pain into purpose. One afternoon, while sipping coffee in a small cafe, we crafted our first workshop outline. We focused on the importance of representation in healthcare, how it impacts patient care and outcomes, and the urgent need for diverse voices in leadership roles. As we discussed the logistics, I couldn't help but marvel at how far I had come. Not long ago, I had felt silenced and overlooked. Now I was actively working to create a platform for others like me. It was exhilarating. However, as the momentum built, I couldn't ignore the underlying tension that still existed in our workplace. There were whispers of discontent among some of my colleagues. Not everyone was ready to embrace change. Some were resistant to the idea that they needed to reassess their own biases and beliefs. I could feel the unease in the air, especially during meetings. The subtle glances, the hushed conversations that ceased when I entered the room. It was a reminder that not everyone shared our vision. Despite the challenges, we pressed on, fueled by the knowledge that change often comes with discomfort. We scheduled our first workshop for the following month, and the anticipation was palpable. I remember staring at the calendar on my wall, counting down the days. Would anyone even show up? Would they be open to listening? Would they challenge our ideas? Or would they embrace them? The day of the workshop arrived, and I felt a whirlwind of emotions. I arrived early to set up the room, arranging chairs and preparing materials. As the clock ticked closer to the start time, my heart raced. I wanted this to be impactful. I wanted our voices to resonate. Slowly, people began to trickle in, some familiar faces, some new. I welcomed them all, but I couldn't shake the feeling of apprehension. Would they truly understand the urgency of our message? Would they be willing to engage in the difficult conversations we were about to have? As the room filled, I took a deep breath, reminding myself of our purpose. We were here to share our stories, to shine a light on the issues that had plagued our field for far too long. As we began, I felt the energy shift. Eyes were glued to us, and an unexpected sense of camaraderie developed in that space. My colleague opened the session by sharing her personal story, detailing her journey through medical school and the hurdles she faced as a woman of color. Her voice was steady, yet the emotion behind her words was palpable. I could see the audience leaning in, captivated by her honesty. It was a raw reminder of why we were doing this. Then it was my turn. I recounted my own experiences, the struggles I had faced in the early years of my career, the moments of doubt that had threatened to overshadow my ambitions. I spoke about the ceremony where I had been asked to sit at the back, and how it had ignited a fire within me. I could feel the weight of the room, the shared understanding that filled the air. As the workshop progressed, we invited open dialogue. Questions flowed, stories emerged, and insights were shared. I could see the shift happening, the realization dawning on some that change was necessary and achievable. It was a beautiful moment, one that reaffirmed our mission and our voices. After the workshop, we received an outpouring of gratitude. People approached us with thank yous, sharing their own stories and expressing a desire to be part of the change. It felt surreal, validating every ounce of effort we had put into this initiative. We had sparked something, and I was filled with hope. Yet, as the applause faded, I was reminded that our journey was far from over. We needed to keep the momentum going, to ensure that these conversations didn't stop here. It would take continuous effort to challenge the status quo, to dismantle the barriers that had long been accepted as the norm. In the following weeks, we gathered feedback and planned our next steps. The response from the workshop had been overwhelmingly positive, and we were inspired to host additional sessions and expand our reach. We started to collaborate with other departments, inviting more voices to the table. It was exhilarating, but also daunting. I remember one meeting in particular, where we sat around a table with our department heads. The atmosphere was tense, and I could sense the hesitancy from some of the senior staff. They were accustomed to the way things had always been done, and the prospect of change made them uncomfortable. As we presented our ideas, I felt a lump in my throat. This was a critical moment. After our presentation, there was a long silence. I could see the wheels turning in their heads, and finally, one of the senior members spoke up. "This is all great, but how do we implement these changes without disrupting our current workflow?" It was a valid question, and one that I had anticipated. It was easy to talk about change, but much harder to execute it. We engaged in a back-and-forth discussion, presenting solutions and addressing their concerns. As the conversation continued, I found myself gaining confidence. The more I spoke, the more clarity I had about our objectives. Change was uncomfortable, yes, but it was also necessary. It was an uphill battle, but I was determined to fight. Eventually, the meeting concluded with a commitment to pilot our ideas. It felt like a victory, a small but significant step towards the change we sought. As I left the room, I realized that this was only the beginning. The path ahead was still fraught with challenges, but I was ready to face them, armed with the support of my colleagues and the shared vision we had ignited. I knew that our voices mattered, that together we could create a ripple effect that would resonate throughout our institution and beyond. The fight for equity in healthcare was far from over, but we were no longer alone in the struggle. We had each other, and together, we were unstoppable. As I walked through the bustling hallways, I felt a mix of exhilaration and apprehension. The meeting had lit a fire within me, but I also knew that the real work was just beginning. Each step echoed with the voices of my colleagues, their hopes and fears intertwining with my own. It wasn't just about the ideas we had pitched. It was about turning those ideas into tangible actions that could reshape our workplace, and ultimately, our community. In the days that followed, we started to form smaller task forces. Each group was charged with tackling specific areas of our proposal. I found myself in a team focused on outreach and education. We wanted to ensure that our efforts reached everyone, especially those who had historically been marginalized or overlooked. This was a pivotal moment. We weren't just pushing for change within our institution, we were aiming for a broader impact. I remember one meeting in particular, where we were brainstorming strategies to engage the local community. Ideas flowed like water, but the excitement was soon dampened by a harsh reality check. "What if no one shows up to our events?" one of my teammates asked, her brow furrowed with concern. "How do we know they even care about what we're doing?" Her question hung in the air, and for a moment, I felt my own enthusiasm wane. It was easy to get caught up in our vision, but we needed to ground ourselves in the realities of the people we were trying to reach. I took a deep breath, channeling the confidence I had found in the earlier meeting. "We have to meet them where they are," I suggested. "Let's go into the community, listen to their concerns, and build relationships. We need to show that we're not just talking at them. We want to empower them to be part of this conversation." My words seemed to resonate, and the discussion shifted toward actionable steps. We decided to host informal gatherings at local parks, where we could provide free health screenings and educational workshops. The idea was to create an inviting atmosphere, one that broke down barriers and fostered trust. As we planned these events, the weight of our mission became increasingly palpable. I found myself thinking about the families we were trying to reach, the mothers worried about their children's access to care, the elderly facing transportation issues, the young adults unsure of where to turn for help. Their stories fueled my determination. I wanted to bridge the gap between our institution and the community, to dismantle the barriers that had kept so many people from receiving the care they deserved. The weeks flew by, and before I knew it, our first event was right around the corner. There was a whirlwind of activity leading up to it. Flyers were printed, volunteers were recruited, and resources were gathered. I felt a sense of urgency, a tight knot of excitement mixed with anxiety in my stomach. What if no one came? What if we had put in all this effort for nothing? But I pushed those thoughts aside. I reminded myself that this was about more than just one event. It was about laying the groundwork for a long-term relationship. We were creating a foundation that could support ongoing dialogue, education, and trust. The day of the event arrived, and I stood at the entrance of the park, watching as the sun rose over the trees. I could hardly believe how beautiful it was, the vibrant colors reflecting the energy I felt inside. Slowly, people began to trickle in. Families, individuals, and curious passers-by all made their way toward our makeshift setup. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. They were here. They were interested. As we moved through the day, I had the opportunity to speak with many attendees. I listened to their stories, their challenges, and their hopes for improved healthcare. It was eye-opening to hear firsthand the realities they faced every day. I found myself sharing our vision, our commitment to change, and how we intended to make their voices a central part of our mission. The conversations were candid and illuminating. Some attendees were skeptical. They had been let down before. "How can I trust that this time will be different?" one woman asked, her eyes narrowed in suspicion. I paused, understanding her hesitance. "I get it," I replied. "Trust isn't built overnight, but we're here to listen and learn from you. We genuinely want to be part of the solution." As I spoke, I could see the walls she had built starting to crack just a little. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. The more I engaged, the more I realized that this was not just a one-way conversation. We were forging connections, and that was what mattered most. By the end of the day, I was exhausted but energized. We had provided health screenings, handed out resources, and engaged in meaningful dialogue. It felt like we had made a dent in something much bigger than ourselves. I couldn't help but smile as I watched families leave the park, some clutching bags filled with information, and others simply chatting animatedly about the things they had learned. Reflecting on the day, I couldn't shake the question that had been posed in our planning meeting. What if no one showed up? The truth was that people had come, they had engaged, and they had shared. It was a reminder of the power of connection and the importance of community involvement. I still had a long way to go, but I felt more hopeful than ever. This was just the beginning, a chance to build a bridge between us and the community. I couldn't help but wonder, how far could we go together? What impact could we truly have if we continued to listen and collaborate? What would you have done in my shoes? Let me know below. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden hue over the park, I gathered my belongings and took a moment to breathe in the day's accomplishments. The laughter of children playing nearby and the chatter of families resonated in the air, a beautiful symphony of life and connection. But as I packed up our booth, a sense of apprehension crept back in. I had been riding high on the wave of success, but I knew that the real test was yet to come. The ceremony was only a few days away, and while I had helped organize the event, I was still unsure of how I would fit into the program. I had experienced the excitement of the Community Engagement Day, but now it was time for a more formal gathering, a place where my voice and my contributions would be evaluated. I had been told to sit in the back during the ceremony, a suggestion that didn't sit well with me. It felt like a reminder of my place, a whisper that I was still an outsider, still trying to prove myself. The day of the ceremony arrived, and I dressed carefully, choosing a crisp white blouse and tailored black pants that made me feel confident. As I walked into the auditorium, the air felt thick with anticipation. The room was buzzing, filled with community leaders, hospital staff, and families eager to celebrate our collective efforts. I took a deep breath and headed toward the back, where I was instructed to sit. As I settled into my chair, I felt a wave of mixed emotions. I was proud of what we had accomplished, but I also felt like I was fading into the background. As the ceremony began, speakers took to the stage, sharing their stories of triumph and resilience. Each story resonated deeply within me, reminding me of the struggles and the victories we had experienced together. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the outside looking in. Then something unexpected happened. The hospital director, a figure of immense authority and respect, walked up to the podium. His presence commanded the room, and as he began to speak, I felt a shift in the atmosphere. His words were warm and inviting as he recounted the journey we had all taken together. I listened intently, feeling a swell of pride. He talked about our Community Engagement Day, the impact we had made, and the importance of collaboration. But then he paused, and I could see the excitement in his eyes as he said, "I would like to invite a special guest to the stage today, someone who has shown incredible dedication and passion for our mission. Chief Surgeon, please take the stage." My heart raced. I looked around, bewildered, as I realized he was looking right at me. In that moment, I was flooded with a mix of disbelief and exhilaration. Me? The chief surgeon? It felt surreal, as if I were trapped in a dream where I was both the protagonist and the spectator. As I stood up, I could feel the weight of everyone's gaze on me, 1,000 eyes filled with curiosity and expectation. My palms felt clammy, and I took a steadying breath before making my way to the front of the auditorium. As I climbed the steps to the stage, my mind raced. What would I say? How could I possibly convey the depth of my gratitude and the urgency of our mission in just a few minutes? I reached the podium, and as I looked out at the sea of faces, I felt a rush of adrenaline. There was no turning back now. "Thank you," I began, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts in my head. "Thank you for this incredible honor. It truly means the world to me to be here today, representing not just myself, but every single person who has dedicated their time and effort to making a difference in our community." I paused for a moment, allowing the gravity of my words to settle in. What we accomplished during our Community Engagement Day was not just a series of events, it was a testament to the strength of our community. It was about forging connections, understanding each other's struggles, and working together to create a healthier future for all of us. As I spoke, I could see nods of agreement and encouragement from the audience, and it fueled my confidence. I continued, "I stand here today not just as a surgeon, but as a member of this community. I am as invested in your health and well-being as you are in mine. Together, we can tackle the challenges we face. Together, we can be the change we want to see." The applause that erupted from the audience felt like a wave crashing over me, lifting me up and carrying me forward. I felt empowered, as if I were finally stepping into my role, not just as a surgeon, but as a leader within this community. I shared stories of patients I had met, the struggles they faced, and the hope that came from our collective efforts. I spoke about the importance of listening, of understanding that healthcare is not just about treatment, but about compassion and empathy. As I concluded my speech, I looked out into the crowd, my heart swelling with gratitude. Thank you for believing in this mission. Thank you for standing together with me. Let's continue to build this bridge between us, to support one another, and to create a healthier future for everyone. The applause was thunderous as I stepped back from the podium, a mix of relief and elation washing over me. I had done it. I had stepped out of the shadows and into the light, and in that moment, I knew I was where I was meant to be. As I walked back to my seat, I felt a sense of belonging that I had longed for since I first arrived. I had found my voice, and it was just the beginning of what we could achieve together. As I made my way back to my seat, the cheers and claps still echoing in my ears, I caught sight of some familiar faces in the audience. There was Dr. Reed, the head of pediatrics, who had always encouraged me to share my ideas, even when I felt hesitant. And then there was Maria, the nurse manager I had worked alongside in the emergency department, her eyes sparkling with pride. I felt a rush of gratitude for the support system that had helped me navigate my journey thus far. It was in that moment that I truly understood the power of community, of standing together against the odds. The ceremony continued, filled with speeches from various leaders in the hospital and the community. Each story shared echoed the themes I had touched on: resilience, unity, and compassion. It was uplifting, a reminder that we were all part of something much larger than ourselves. But as the speeches progressed, I felt the weight of something unspoken hanging in the air. There was an undercurrent of tension, a worry that maybe not everyone was on board with the changes we were implementing. The sun began to set outside, casting a golden hue through the windows, and I couldn't help but think back to the challenges we faced. Just months before, I had felt like an outsider, struggling for recognition and respect. But now, standing in front of this audience, I could feel the momentum shifting. As I listened to the final speaker, I couldn't shake off the feeling that this was a pivotal moment, not just for me, but for the entire hospital. Finally, the event came to a close, and the director of the hospital, a tall man with an imposing presence, stepped up to the microphone one last time. He had been a guiding force throughout my time there, often reminding me that change takes time, but it was worth it. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice steady and commanding. "We've heard some incredible stories, and I want to take a moment to highlight the work that Dr. Morgan has done to lead us into a new era of compassionate care." The applause erupted again, and I could feel my cheeks flush with warmth. It was surreal, being recognized in such a public way. He continued, "We have a lot of work ahead, and it's crucial that we continue to support one another. Healthcare is a team effort, and every one of you plays a vital role." When the event finally concluded, people began to disperse. I stood there for a moment, trying to process everything that had just happened. I felt a hand on my shoulder, and I turned to see Dr. Reed smiling at me. "You did an amazing job today. You really captured the spirit of what we're trying to achieve," she said, her eyes twinkling with encouragement. "Thank you," I replied, feeling the weight of her words. It meant so much coming from her. I just hope we can keep this momentum going. As the crowd thinned out, I noticed a small group of new residents huddled together, looking a bit lost. I made my way over to them, eager to welcome them into our community. "Hey there, I'm Dr. Morgan. Are you all new here?" I asked, trying to bring a little warmth into their apprehensive expressions. One of them, a young woman with curly hair and bright eyes, nodded. "Yeah, we just started our rotations this week. It's a bit overwhelming." I smiled, recognizing that familiar feeling of being the new kid on the block. "Trust me, it gets better. Just remember, everyone here is rooting for you. Don't hesitate to ask questions or for help. Seriously, we've all been there." As I chatted with them, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The challenges I had faced weren't just mine alone. They were shared among all of us in that room. I could see the spark of hope in their eyes as we talked about the importance of teamwork, patient care, and the incredible experiences that awaited them. After some time, I said my goodbyes and headed outside. The air was crisp, and the night sky was bright with stars. I took a deep breath, feeling grateful for the journey that had brought me here. The road hadn't been easy, but each obstacle had taught me something valuable. As I walked to my car, I replayed the ceremony in my mind, reflecting on the support I had received and the changes we were all working toward. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing with ideas, possibilities, and dreams of what we could accomplish together. I grabbed my notebook and began jotting down thoughts, envisioning future initiatives that could bridge gaps in our community. I wanted to create programs that would not only educate, but empower patients and families to take an active role in their healthcare. The next day, I found myself sitting in a meeting with my colleagues, sharing my ideas. The enthusiasm in the room was palpable as we brainstormed ways to implement these new programs. Everyone was eager to contribute, and for the first time, I felt like we were all on the same page, pushing toward a common goal. As the weeks passed, we began to see the fruits of our labor. Patient engagement soared, and we started to receive feedback from families who felt more involved in their care. It was incredibly rewarding, and the energy in the hospital shifted. People were inspired, motivated, and united. The changes we were making were just the beginning, and I knew there would be challenges ahead. But with each step forward, I felt a deeper connection to my colleagues and the community we served. We were all in this together, and together we would continue to rise. I had no idea how much those initial changes would ripple through our hospital and community. The excitement wasn't just confined to our little team, it was spreading like wildfire. I remember sitting in the break room one day, sipping my coffee while a group of nurses animatedly discussed a recent patient success story. They were so proud of how they had taken the time to explain the treatment plan to a family, ensuring they understood every step. That simple act had transformed not just the family's experience, but also how the nurses felt about their roles. It was heartwarming to witness. As I listened, I realized that what we were doing wasn't just about improving patient care. It was also about reigniting passion in those who worked in the hospital. For a long time, I had sensed a certain fatigue, a weariness that came from the relentless demands of healthcare. But now it felt like we were all reawakening, finding new purpose in our work. Then came the day of the hospital's annual community health fair. It was a massive event that brought together local organizations, health educators, and community leaders. I had been tasked with organizing a booth that highlighted our new patient engagement initiatives. I was nervous but excited, knowing how important this event could be for spreading awareness. As I set up our booth, I watched families walking by, their children laughing and running towards the various activities. I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for this community, for the people who had come together to support one another, especially after the challenges we had all faced during the pandemic. When the fair officially opened, I was flooded with visitors, all eager to learn more about how they could be more involved in their health journeys. It felt incredible to share our vision with them, to explain how we wanted to empower patients to speak up and ask questions. I remember one woman, a grandmother who was caring for her diabetic grandson, approached my booth. She was skeptical at first, her arms crossed tightly, but as I spoke to her about our initiatives, her posture softened. She shared her struggles with navigating the healthcare system, feeling lost and overwhelmed. By the end of our conversation, I could see the spark of hope in her eyes. She left my booth with a handful of resources and a promise to return with questions. That moment was a profound reminder of why I had chosen this path. It was about more than just medical procedures and treatments. It was about human connection, compassion, and understanding. I spent the entire day engaged in conversations, and each interaction only fueled my desire to keep pushing for change within our hospital. As the fair wound down, I felt a rush of adrenaline and fulfillment. I was exhausted, but exhilarated. That evening, we gathered as a team to debrief, and I couldn't help but share my enthusiasm. The energy was infectious, and we all agreed that we needed to capitalize on this momentum. In the following weeks, we organized workshops and information sessions, encouraging families to come in and learn. We wanted them to know they weren't just passive recipients of care. They were vital participants in the healthcare process. The response was overwhelmingly positive, and soon we were filling the conference room with eager participants, each with their own story and questions. But as the excitement grew, so did the challenges. We began to notice some resistance from a few long-standing staff members who were set in their ways. They were skeptical of the changes we were implementing and worried about how it would affect their routines. I understood their concerns. Change can be daunting, especially in a place like a hospital where every second counts. One afternoon, I found myself in a meeting with a particularly vocal physician who questioned the effectiveness of our new initiatives. He argued that the traditional methods had worked for years, and why fix something that wasn't broken? I felt a knot form in my stomach. I wanted to respect his experience, but I also believed passionately in what we were doing. After listening to his points, I decided to share the success stories we had gathered from patients and families. I spoke from the heart, sharing the grandmother's story and others like it, emphasizing how our initiatives were not just about change for change's sake, but about real people who deserve to feel heard and valued. To my surprise, he softened a bit, admitting that while he hadn't seen those outcomes firsthand, he was open to hearing more. That conversation marked a turning point. It opened the door for dialogue between our teams. I realized that while we might have had different views, we all ultimately wanted the same thing: the best for our patients. With each challenge we faced, I felt more equipped to handle them. I started to see our team as a family, and like any family, we had our disagreements. But the more we leaned into those conversations, the more unified we became. As summer rolled around, we prepared for the annual hospital ceremony, a formal event that recognized the hard work and dedication of the staff. I had always seen it as a chance to celebrate our achievements, but this year felt different. I had a sense that we were on the verge of something monumental. The ceremony arrived, and as I sat in the audience, I felt a mixture of pride and anxiety. I was seated among many of my colleagues, feeling the weight of anticipation in the air. I watched as our director took the stage, ready to deliver his speech. My heart raced as I thought about how far we had come together. I had no idea that what was about to happen would change everything for me. As he spoke, I noticed the crowd's reaction. They were engaged, nodding and whispering among themselves. And then it happened. With a sudden shift in tone, he turned to me and said, "Chief Surgeon, please take the stage." In that moment, time seemed to freeze. My breath caught in my throat as I realized he was talking to me. I stood up, my heart pounding, and made my way to the front. This was more than just recognition. It was an invitation to share our journey, our triumphs, and our vision for the future. I was ready. As I stepped up to the podium, the world around me faded into a blur. The faces in the audience transformed into a sea of support, but my thoughts were a whirlwind of emotion. I could feel the warmth of the spotlight on my skin, illuminating the years of hard work, dedication, and late nights. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that this wasn't just about me. It was about all of us, our collective journey through challenges and breakthroughs. I looked down at my notes, but instead of reading them, I felt compelled to speak from my heart. "Thank you for that introduction," I began, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "It's an honor to stand before you today as your chief surgeon, but I want to emphasize that this title is not just mine alone. It belongs to every single person in this room." I glanced at my colleagues, their expressions a mix of pride and encouragement. I continued, "Together, we've built a team that thrives on collaboration, compassion, and innovation. It hasn't always been easy. We've faced setbacks and heartaches, but each challenge has only strengthened our resolve." A wave of nostalgia washed over me as I recalled the late nights in the operating room, the intense moments when we saved lives, and the laughter we shared during breaks. Those memories felt like fuel, igniting my passion and reminding me why I chose this path in the first place. I want you to remember that every stitch we sew, every life we touch, contributes to something greater. We are not just healers, we are advocates for hope. The applause that followed felt like a warm embrace, but I wasn't finished yet. I wanted to inspire them, to ignite that same fire within each of them that had propelled me forward. Today, we stand at the precipice of change. We have the power to reshape the future of healthcare in our community. It's up to us to lead with empathy, to push boundaries, and to innovate relentlessly. Let's not shy away from the challenges ahead, but rather embrace them as opportunities to grow and learn. I could see heads nodding, eyes sparkling with renewed energy. It was in that moment that I realized the impact of vulnerability. Sharing my own fears and dreams had sparked something in them. I know many of you have faced your own struggles, whether it's balancing work and family or dealing with the pressures of patient care. I want you to know that it's okay to feel overwhelmed sometimes. What matters is that we support each other, lifting one another up when we stumble. As I spoke, I felt my confidence growing. I remembered the times I doubted myself, the moments when I thought I wasn't enough. But here I was, standing tall, surrounded by a community that believed in me. We are stronger together. Let's continue to nurture that sense of belonging and make this place not just a hospital, but a home where every voice is heard. The applause thundered again, but this time it felt different. It was a unified call to action, a promise that we would rise to the occasion. I concluded my speech with a heartfelt invitation. Let's embark on this journey together. Let's create a legacy that we can be proud of, not just for ourselves, but for generations to come. Thank you. As I stepped down from the stage, I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. My colleagues greeted me with warm hugs and congratulations, their words of praise enveloping me like a soft blanket. Yet, amid the celebration, I couldn't shake the feeling that something more significant was at play. Once the ceremony concluded, people began to disperse, but many lingered, eager to discuss ideas and share their thoughts. I was approached by a young nurse, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "Your speech was incredible. I've always admired how you lead with such passion. It's inspiring to see someone in your position care so deeply." I smiled at her, feeling a sense of responsibility to encourage the next generation. "Thank you. It's important to me that everyone feels empowered to share their ideas. You have a voice too. Don't hesitate to speak up." As the evening unfolded, I found myself in conversation after conversation, each interaction deepening my sense of connection with my colleagues. We talked about new initiatives, shared patient stories, and brainstormed ways to improve our services. The energy in the room was palpable, a vibrant tapestry of collaboration and shared purpose. But then, amid the excitement, I noticed the hospital director standing off to the side, watching us with a thoughtful expression. I felt a twinge of curiosity about what was going through his mind. Had he seen the potential that I had hoped to ignite? I made my way over to him, eager to engage in a conversation that could possibly lead to new opportunities. "Thank you for your words today. They really resonated with everyone," he said, his voice steady and genuine. I could sense a shift in the atmosphere as we spoke, as if the air around us crackled with possibility. "I believe we're on the brink of something remarkable, and I want to ensure you have the resources you need to continue this momentum." His words filled me with hope, and I found myself articulating my vision for the future. A future where we could innovate and elevate patient care. It felt like we were aligned, and I could sense that he was genuinely invested in making our collective dreams a reality. As the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. We had set something in motion, and I knew in my heart that together, we were destined to achieve great things. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, but I was ready to embrace them, fueled by the unwavering support of my colleagues and the shared vision we had ignited that day. As I stood there, surrounded by the buzz of energy and excitement, I felt an undeniable sense of purpose. The conversations that unfolded around me were more than just exchanges of words. They were threads weaving a tapestry of collaboration and innovation. I looked around at my colleagues, each one a vital piece of this puzzle, and I couldn't help but smile. We had faced so many obstacles together, but now it felt like we were finally charting a course toward something truly transformative. Over the next few weeks, the momentum we had built began to take shape. Meetings turned into brainstorming sessions that overflowed with ideas. We gathered in our conference room, whiteboards filled with diagrams and plans, each scribble representing a step toward progress. The atmosphere was electric. Everyone's voices were heard, and I could see the passion in their eyes. It was contagious. I found myself waking up every morning excited to dive into the work, to collaborate, to innovate. But with progress came challenges. As our initiatives gained traction, I encountered skepticism from some corners. There were whispers of doubt, concerns over feasibility, and the ever-looming fear of failure. I remember one specific meeting where the conversation turned tense. One of the senior executives voiced their concerns, and I felt the weight of their words pressing down on me. How can we justify this investment? What makes you think this will work? They were valid questions, but in that moment, I felt the stirrings of insecurity. Had I overstepped? Was I leading us into a risky venture without sufficient backing? Taking a deep breath, I leaned into the discomfort. I understand the concerns, I began, my voice steady but firm. But I believe in what we're building here. We've seen the impact of our initial trials, and we have the data to support it. This isn't just a gamble. It's a calculated risk based on real outcomes. As I spoke, I could feel the warmth of my colleagues rallying behind me. Their nods, their glances of encouragement, fueled my confidence. It was a reminder that I wasn't alone in this fight. Eventually, my passion and persistence began to sway the skeptics. I shared stories of patients whose lives had changed because of our efforts, highlighting the very reason we were all here. It wasn't just about the numbers. It was about making a real difference. By the end of that meeting, there was a palpable shift. The doubts began to fade, replaced by a cautious optimism that filled the room. And in that moment, I realized that leadership isn't just about having all the answers. It's about inspiring belief in a shared vision. As we dove deeper into the project, I found myself more connected than ever with my team. We celebrated small victories, whether it was a successful pilot program launch or positive feedback from patients and families. Each success reinforced our commitment to the journey ahead. I remember one afternoon, sitting around a table with a few of my colleagues, laughing and brainstorming over coffee. What if we could expand this to other departments? Someone suggested, eyes bright with enthusiasm. And just like that, our vision grew larger, more ambitious. It was thrilling to think that we could revolutionize not just our area, but potentially the entire institution. But the real test came when we presented our proposal to the board. As I stood at the podium, my heart raced. This was it. The culmination of all our hard work was about to be laid bare. I looked out at the faces of the board members, their expressions a mix of skepticism and curiosity. I opened with a story, one that resonated deeply with our mission. I could see nods of understanding as I painted a picture of what our future could look like. It was a moment of truth, and I felt every ounce of my training and experience surge through me as I delivered our vision with unwavering conviction. After what felt like an eternity, we reached the end of our presentation. I took a deep breath and waited for the questions that I knew would come. To my surprise, the first response was positive. "This is impressive work. I appreciate the thoroughness of your research and the passion behind your proposal." My heart soared. It wasn't just about approval. It was about recognition. We had done something remarkable together, and it was being acknowledged. As the meeting concluded and we left the boardroom, I felt a rush of relief wash over me. My colleagues were ecstatic, and their excitement was infectious. "We did it!" one of them exclaimed. I realized that this was a team effort. Every voice, every idea contributed to this moment. We were not just co-workers. We had become a family, united by a shared passion and purpose. Reflecting on this journey, I'm reminded of the importance of resilience and belief in oneself and each other. The road has been bumpy, filled with moments of doubt and uncertainty, but it has also been paved with triumphs, laughter, and an unwavering commitment to our mission. I have learned that true leadership is about lifting others, listening, and fostering a collaborative spirit. As we move forward, I am filled with hope and excitement for what lies ahead. This is not just a conclusion. It's the beginning of something extraordinary. As I close this chapter, I want to ask you, what challenges have you faced that ultimately shaped your path? Let me know below. Your stories inspire me and remind me that we're all in this journey together. Thank you for being a part of mine.